I can't see. This gun is too powerful. Hey folks, Dachshund Wedge here. Today, I'm going to be talking about black and white photos in virtual photography. This is going to apply to really any game, but I'm going to be using CyberPunk for this. And hopefully at the end of it, you'll have some nice tips and tricks for how to take better black and white photos. So for the past few months, I've actually been doing almost exclusively black and white photography just to improve that for myself. And I've really enjoyed the experience, and I think I've learned a lot. So I'm basically just going to be sharing with you what I've been learning from my real world photography and trying to apply it here. Did that car just appear out of nowhere? Okay. What is color in photos and why do we care about it? So if we look at this has a pretty pronounced subject, right? And that's what you're looking for when you're doing a photo composition, is like a pronounced subject that draws the viewer's eye. A lot of the times that's what you want, at least. So here we have this bright billboard with yellow lines pointing to it and some blue on the side. All of this, if we were to compose a photo maybe like this, let's actually just jump in. So if we have something like this, the bright yellows and reds immediately draw your eye. So obviously, when you remove these colors, which you do here by going into 6, 7, it's effect 7, the all foods text loses a lot of contrast because of the color. And same with the blue and yellow. Blue and yellow are contrasting opposite colors. They sort of drop off on this right. And you can see all the detail on the right hand side of the screen is sort of gone. All foods doesn't stick out so much. The bright yellow doesn't draw your eye as much. This really sort of loses its focal point when you turn color off. So that's what you want to watch out for not to do, is find things that like stand out to you when you are looking at it with color vision, but when you turn it to black and white, it just loses all its contrast because the contrast was contained in the color and not the difference between brightness. And that's really what you're looking for with black and white, is differences between brightness rather than differences between color. So you can see this is a much, much different picture just because that bright yellow and blue and red gets pulled out of it. So what does this mean when you're taking an actual photo rather than just talking about it theoretically? All right, so what we're looking for here is actually sort of a landscape that looks sort of chaotic. So think like this sort of stuff, but with a high ratio of bright to dark. So with one part being dark in shade and one part being lit bright, like over here. That's the type of thing that I typically look for when I'm browsing, trying to take a black and white photo. Something like this, where you can do that. So like, if I wanted this thing to be the subject, I could try to position myself so that it is lit and the background is not. Something like that. I don't think that's a very good photo, so we're not going to do that. But that's the type of thing I'm looking for while I'm wandering around, and I'll be back when I find it. Okay, this is a bit closer. So as you can see here, I don't know quite how I want to do this yet, but we've got this bio-waste bin that actually has a really bright reflection, but the background for it is in darkness, and we've also got the fire that can also act as sort of a beacon. So if we cut out everything except for the brightness on here, and then use the background, even though, we've got this bright distracting red over there, when we go into black and white, that red is not going to be as distracting. So hopefully we can use that to simplify and bring the photo, bring the subject of the fire and the bio-waste container out a bit more. Okay, well, the fire doesn't look so great, but this is a good example of another thing you can do. So you can see we've got our bin in focus, and we're using the depth of field intentionally here to keep our bins in focus while also keeping the background faded out. So that sort of compounds with the black and white that we're going to put on it. So we'll go to effect. And so you can see that red you can barely even see at all. And this really changes the scene. We've got some light up here, some light over here that sort of brings it out, but I think I want to crop that out just to keep as little lit as possible. So something like that. Looks okay. The subject is not very interesting here, but you can see the idea of how we had an initially really complex scene with all the color, But when we take the color away, things like this yellow, this red, this jumble over here, all sort of blends together. And you can use this to take a very busy area and turn it into a much simpler area with a much sharper focus on the subject. All right, we're out here in a market with lots of color, which should be a good example, I hope. It's sort of like this. So here, I could see this being a good photo with all the lighting that we have. It also has another thing that I like, which is textures and lines. So I think here we've got something reasonable. The open with arrows pointing down, those are good lines. We've got some lines on the side here. I might actually cut that out and on the left too. We've also got sails on here, but sails is one of those things that's actually not brighter than the other things on there. So when we take this into black and white, it should sort of fade into the background and be less prominent. So I'm more okay with that being there and having open be sort of the focal point, pointing you down into the rest of the photo where it says chillax. So I like this a lot. Using lines, there's a lot of nice texture with the brick wall and the lights and this mesh, which is another thing that you want in order to sort of show things off in black and white. Since you don't have color, texture and lines can add interest to the photo where the color would have been. So let's go ahead and switch this to black and white. And finally, the last thing that I think is important to think about with black and white. So you can see the sails almost disappears here. We're gonna take stickers. We're gonna put a frame around the sides, I think, right? Trying to line up thirds and make sure everything is actually in frame. Okay, well, we got a little frame on the sides. If this were a real photo, I would probably crop this a bit more. The last thing that I wanted to talk a bit about with black and white is contrast and editing with contrast and color. So when you're doing color, you have to be really careful with contrast because it's very easy to clip. And what I mean by clipping is when you reach the top or bottom of the brightness scale on something, you will clip out. So your monitor can only display pure white. If you push more than one color up to pure white, then you will start to actually lose details because you'll have white and then slightly low white will both look bright white. The same thing can happen with deep dark. So if I go and take the exposure and crank up the exposure, these are not slides, you can see we lose the detail of the open sign when we go all the way up here. It brings out the darker details, but we lose the details in the top. This is clipping. We're clipping out at the top. And likewise, if we come down, you can see we lost details in the sail sign. We lost the steps down here. We lost just a lot of details. In black and white photos, clipping out, that is having pure whites and pure blacks, actually looks a little bit better. It's a little bit more understandable, but it is something you have to watch out for. And so because of this, typically when I do my black and white photos, I always bring the contrast up higher than I normally would with color. So for example, I can bring this up. And so normally when I bring up the contrast, I also want to bring up the exposure to sort of match and bring things up, and just watch for clipping. So we're not really clipping out. We got a little bit of issue here up at the top. And I think because of the way this bleeds, I actually really liked bringing this down, you know, getting rid of all those details on the side. I think this is too much. I still want to get him illuminated a bit. So I think I'd settle on something like this, where you can see the open and the chillax. I think maybe need to be down even a bit more. Yeah, we're clipping out with him. Okay, I think I figured out something. So we got the lights coming in and looking down here. I think it still needs some tweaks, but we've got the lights in sort of a distinct area. We've got the contrast so you can see the background here versus this pure white. Chillax is still pure white and sort of bleeding out, and I'm okay with that. The sail sign is off over here and not really there. You've got this, which is white, which contrasts with the black, which is okay. We've got some texture here. Then we've got the character down here. And I think altogether this works pretty well. The only thing is I'd like to bring him out a bit more. Something like that, where you can see him eating. And we've got open, chillax, yeah. There's a rail over here on the side. I would probably cut that out. I think I would crop this photo like right here, but I can't actually move to the left anymore. I don't know if you can hear that, but I'm clicking and it's not moving to the left anymore. So in real photography, I think what I would do, probably for the thumbnail of this video, what I'll do is cut this out. Or maybe what we do, this is another shot that I've been thinking of doing, just to cut out more of the busy parts, and then we can really bring the exposure way down. I actually really like that. And you can get the good texture up in the wall. We've got arrows pointing down to chillax. We've got open. I like it. You don't see the sail so much. I think this is the shot that I actually want. So that's going to be my tips and tricks for black and white photo mode. To summarize, use your lighting right. Lines and textures are useful when you can't use color. Using black and white can simplify otherwise complicated scenes, if those complicated scenes are complicated because there is too much color. So keep that in mind. I think that's the biggest thing. And when I'm walking around, what I do when I'm looking for black and white photos, again, is just look for big differences between bright and dark. So I'm looking for interesting subjects that are lit with dark shaded backgrounds, something like this. So yeah, that's it for me. I'll be back with more photos. I moved, so I've been busy and haven't been uploading stuff, but I'm hoping to start out doing that a bit more, and I will see you next time.